All right, awesome, Joan. Well, thank you so much for being here. You've been through a really awesome, interesting, wild couple months here. And we've been diving into a lot of fun things. So I'm excited that you're going to be sharing a couple of things of what you learned through your process with the world. One thing I think you've kind of learned through this process is that creating better mental health and finding a greater sense of internal peace is partly about making sure that the dominant force of our life is revolving around contributing to other people. And so I really just want to celebrate you for taking your journey and using that as a vehicle to help other people. It means a lot. So thanks for doing that. I thought we would start with just, could you share a little bit about kind of your background? Where were you at in life when you and I got connected, just to kind of set the stage for people of what you were dealing with and where you were at?
Certainly. So for a very, very long time, I was full of hatred, full of anger, full of blaming everyone else apart from myself. Years of seeing psychiatrists, psychologists, being on interesting medication. It took me to a very, very miserable, very, very dark place. And even until just before we met, I was close to suicide, like in suicidal tendencies. It was just incredibly putting stupid posts on Facebook, which is actually what led me. Someone just sent me a link, said, go to Hicks. And I was still like, yeah, whatever. It's probably just another,
Right, who's this guy? Yeah.
Yeah, but it was just like, oh yeah, God, just another scam. And then just looking back, I'm just like, oh, thank God for that.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. No, it was really great. We got connected, and it's interesting how things kind of happen at the right time. I find that, psychologically, we tend to put things off for about as long as we possibly can. And then it's almost like we reach this point where we realize, like, okay, I have to make a change now. And it's a very helpful thing. That's why one of the things I coach people on is that frustration and pain can be very useful so long as we channel them in the right direction. And you did a really good job of doing that. I think you just had a big dissatisfaction with how things really were. One thing I think is really interesting about your story is, I've worked with all sorts of people who've been dealing with depression and anxiety and all sorts of things, but there was so much anger kind of built up in you for, and there was a lot of internal thoughts, but internal thoughts that were of a different kind of caliber. Can you just kind of share a little bit about like how, what was some of the like internal dialogue kind of going on? You don't have to go super explicit if you don't want to, but just so that people can kind of get a sense of your particular patterns. Because I don't think people really will understand exactly how dark of a spot you were in, until they kind of realize that that was the element. And then also help us understand kind of what that was doing to your relationships, because one takeaway I want people listening to this to learn from your story is that our mental health is really determined by our relationships and vice versa, right? They're really just two sides of the same coin. And both of yours, I know, were really not where you wanted them to be at the time.
Yeah, so as much as blaming other people, I would even actually go a step further. My internal dialogue was, oh, how dare they do that? They need to pay the price. How dare they do that? What can I do to make them suffer? That was literally exactly where I'd go, no matter how big or small it would appear that they did something, when in actual fact, they're going about their daily lives and it's nothing to do with me. It's nothing personal. But of course, my dialogue was, what do I do to hurt them? I need to do something. And I would absolutely focus on that hatred, on that blame, just what made me want to vomit thinking about it now, even talking about it.
Right. So, and, I think one thing that I would love for people to take away from this is this concept of right and wrong. So I see that people get caught up in this all of the time. And we all were raised with different beliefs about what's right and what's wrong. And we've gotten reinforced with different lessons. Of course, there's lots of different versions. And one of the big things that you and I worked on was making sure that we created a little bit of a wider view, like a little bit of a wider space, so that we're not kind of getting you so pigeonholed into one definition of right and wrong. I even go so far as to call it the delusion of right and wrong, because we can slip ourselves into thinking, we our mind can get in a habit of assigning blame for things that there's really no point in assigning blame for, right? So as you kind of went through this couple of months working through this process, you kind of peeled back some of the layers. Can you just kind of like walk us through a little bit of what that journey was like for you? Like what old beliefs did you have to confront? And how did you kind of go through that growth process? What was that like a little bit to kind of shed those layers of negativity?
It was both exhausting and empowering at the same time, knowing that there's just that, just being more open-minded than anything. Just actually questioning, just because a few of the exercises you helped me do and just recommended where I'd go is just actually questioning all these beliefs, actually questioning all these thoughts. Because like even stopping with, is that really true? I'm like, oh no, it's not. Oh, and then it started to just crumble. All these delusions of this is the way it should be. It all just completely crumbled. And I'd actually felt such a huge sense of relief. But it's like I don't know, it's like a shade just came over my eyes and now I can actually see properly.
And what do you think that shade was? How would you describe what that shade was?
Well, it was a soul belief since I don't know how old, that I'm not a good person. I'm a horrible person. And then it would lead to people need to pay. I'm a horrible person, therefore other people need to suffer. I don't know how long I had that belief for.
You know, what's really fascinating is when I remember distinctly when you and I had our first couple of conversations, you were not saying, I think I'm a horrible person. You were so caught up in, well, they're horrible people and they did this to me. And right. And so it's a good reminder for all of us that whatever your mind tells you when you are sad or afraid is a lie, right? Our mind, when we are in that negative state, will come up with the most obtuse stories to illustrate and narrate our past and what people have done. And it's what was interesting in your case, I really want people to get this from your particular story, is anger can be an emotional resource that we can hide behind. And I think that was the case for you, is you really at the beginning, you felt very disempowered, but through anger and this like internal narration of blame and justice and, you know, who's going to pay and all of that, anger can be a way where we artificially inflate ourselves again when we feel diminished. And it kind of gives us that artificial sense of significance. And so one of the cool things that I've loved about your journey is you've had to find new ways to find your sense of self-worth and your sense of significance, as opposed to going through the artificial fuel of just propping up the ego with anger, right? And I think that's a really beautiful thing. So why don't we talk a little bit about that? Like since you're not putting your energy into, you know, this person did this and this person did that, right? Where are you putting your energy now? Where did you start to change that? And where are you finding that you're finding it's more fulfilling to put your focus and your attention now?
Well, the bottom line out of all of anything, when all that negativity just went away, was that I actually wanted to help people. And my questions started turning out going, okay, what can I do to help? But I remember one of the lessons, it was just what you can control, what you can influence, and what you can't control. So, of course, all the stuff you can control and influence, yeah, fair enough, pay attention to that. Things you can't control, well, just let it go, just let it happen. And to me, it was really hard, but simple at the same time, just to go, oh, okay. And so now I can actually focus on a little bit more positivity, just starting off by, just making people laugh. So make their day a little bit, just make them smile a bit, because you never know what they're going through. There's no need to be negative. Yeah. And if it makes their day, then sort of a little win.
No, that's awesome. Gosh, it's just amazing. I'm very inspired by you and your whole approach and energy, because for you to have gone from just a couple of months ago feeling totally convinced that other people were the ones who were causing your suffering, and now you've done literally a full 180, and now you're like, how can I help other people? It's just blows me away. But the thing I was going to point out too, that I really want people to understand, is that the little phrase I like to use is that we can only feel emotional pain when we're focused on ourselves. I shared that with you at some point in your journey.
Yeah.
And it's not to say, people confuse that and think that I'm, it's not to say that when you're dealing with depression or anxiety that you're a selfish person. You're certainly not. It's just that our mind, again, there's a difference between who we are and the mind. The mind can start to have selfish thoughts, where we make the total focal point of our whole life. What are we getting from other people, or what are we not getting from other people that we should? What did other people do to us, right? And it just becomes this whole narrative where it's all around us. And a lot of people get into this idea where they think like, well, yeah, shouldn't I prioritize myself and shouldn't I take care of myself? Yeah, but it's not the same thing, right? And we'll never really be fulfilled long term when we only make our focus about ourselves. That tends to lead to emotional pain. Every time I've ever witnessed it, it leads to emotional pain. The only way to really feel fulfilled is if the dominant force of our life is about service of some kind and or connection of other people. That doesn't mean we totally forfeit our own needs. It just means we really have to make the core driving motivation of our life involving other people. It has to be bigger than us in order for us to really feel uplifted. And you've clearly learned that really powerfully. So I'm wondering if you're comfortable sharing a little bit about your relationship with alcohol through this journey too, because I think some people can really relate to that. So
Yeah.
where were you at kind of when you were filled with anxiety and anger and so on?
Yeah, so even up to, so I've had alcohol issues since probably around about 14. It got really, really bad over the past few years. COVID is not an excuse. But of course, in Australia, it was an essential to have the bottle-os open. Sorry, the alcohol shops. Any excuse I would find, I would drink. I would even start hiding it. It got to a point to a bottle and a half of gin a day. And even when I tried to stop, I was still dancing around the idea of having the occasional drink, trying to, because I still had that belief of, I can't just not drink. It doesn't make sense to people who never drink, which of course makes perfect sense. And it actually came to a hit about 26 days ago. I had a major crisis in terms of drinking, and I actually got to the point where I thought, no, I've worked way too hard for this. That is it. And I refuse to drink anymore. And it's actually part of my identity beliefs that I do not drink. I will never drink again. I don't even have cravings anymore. It's been 26 days.
Wow, that's awesome. That's amazing. And what's really fantastic about that is, gosh, I'm blown away by you, Joan. It's incredible. You've been so strong through this whole process. But what's amazing about what you just said is you're not even having cravings, and it's because you've redefined your identity. I know we had that whole conversation about identity, and it's one thing I want people to get away from this little tidbit of your story is it really is true that the outside world has as much power over us as we give it. And what you have slowly done is you took your power back in your own hands piece by piece, which I think was just really, really powerful stuff. So really cool. And it's a lot easier to not feel the urge to escape into alcohol when you're no longer circulating all of those negative emotional feelings that were typically causing you to want to escape in the first place. Now it's like, well, why would I want to escape? Because I actually enjoyed the majority of my life, right?
Yeah.
So that's really cool. That's fantastic. And then let's talk a little bit about relationships. So can you share a little bit about where were relationships in your life before, and then where are relationships at now? What was maybe one or two breakthroughs you had, because I know that you were really hell-bent on a couple little beliefs earlier on about how to approach relationships. And then there's a couple breakthroughs we were able to help create for you. And now it seems like your relationships are going in a much different direction.
So with who I was and all my addictions, of course, I pushed a lot of people away, and of course, due to blame. What the biggest relationships were my parents. I'd blame them, and I wouldn't listen to them when it was completely legitimate. It was pure hatred, and one of the exercises was just try and be positive towards them for about, I think it was 30 days, and not even 5 days in, things were completely different. It was like I was just more positive to them, just left certain topics out. And so far, everything has completely improved. And even recently, trying to get things into a different perspective on how they might be feeling. Like the traditional, that generation, and I'm not actually kind of coming from a more compassionate and more understanding way of going, okay, so that's actually something I can't control. So what's the point?
Right.
And now we're getting along quite well. People find me more pleasant to be around, especially since I've completely dropped the grog. They all understand that I will never touch it again. And they don't, and they all come to me, for a little bit of advice. I just, or just for a joke, just to cheer them up, because I've got plenty. So
that's awesome. So if I have it right, to kind of summarize for people who might be listening, right, the dominant force before was, really all about, this is kind of an icky word, right? And it was kind of an icky place you were in before, but you were kind of in more of like an entitlement mentality. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Like, right?
Yeah.
Like, I deserve this and I deserve that. And right. And so you really kind of dropped that, and you just said, all right, well, maybe I'll just try letting go of my, not all of my expectations, but the majority of my expectations, at least the unfair ones. And let me just try to make the dominant focus, how can I delight people, or how can I give to other people? And then that itself created a more welcoming and warm relationship. And so I think one takeaway I want people to get out of this is, I think a lot of people get into that headspace where they feel so hurt. And we tend to, when we're in a hurt state, pull away from other people, because we don't want to go first, because we worry if we go first, we're going to get taken advantage of. And so it comes from a total scarcity mindset. When we feel bad about ourselves and we don't feel good, and our sense of self-worth is low, we feel like we're at risk of losing something. And when we feel like we're at risk of losing something, we pull away, and we expect the other person to go first. And we get mad and irritated and come up with all these expectations about why they're not going first. And so when we are able to drop that and give first, two really cool things happen. We feel really good about ourselves. So our sense of self-worth immediately goes up, right? And it goes up in a more powerful way, because we're not just like getting somebody to come and tell us, oh, you're so pretty, oh, you're so nice, when our inside head is going, yeah, well, you don't know what I'm really thinking, right? We actually are now being a better person, right? We're actually proving to ourselves our own sense of self-worth by being a kinder person. So we really increase our self-esteem longer term. And then as we give, it induces reciprocity, right? Because it's so simple, common sense, right? But nobody wants to have a friend who feels like they're trying to take and extract all the time, right? Nobody wants to be in a relationship with somebody where they feel like every time they're in a relationship with that person is just keeping a mental tab of all of the things that they are owed, right? We've all been in that exact thing. So ironically, we've got a culture now where a lot of the talk in psychology is about, if people aren't doing what you need them to do, you need to cut them out of your life. And, sometimes that is the case, but I only recommend that as a last resort usually, because it's so much better if we can just focus more on giving in most cases and just being kind and compassionate. And we end up inducing a lot of reciprocity that way. So I think that, and your story is living proof of that, which is really cool. I think, is it fair to say as well that you are now getting a lot more of your sense of self-worth and self-esteem just from the inside out, so to speak, like from yourself to yourself, as opposed to requiring other people to act or behave a certain way in order for you to feel good? Because I know that was a big thing that was a trigger for you before.
Yeah, I remember needing total validation from someone and needing reassurance that was actually a good compliment. And when people give me compliments, I just go, oh, thank you very much. Yes, I do. And sometimes they go, oh, well, I wasn't expecting that. I was like, damn right. It just feels, it just feels really, really good that I'm just like, yes, yes, I am a good person. I've worked really hard for this. starting off by losing the weight and everything, I've worked really, really hard.
Yes.
It's nice to receive compliments, and I don't have to go, oh my God, I'm not questioning it anymore. It's just like, oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, because you believe it, because because we're not waiting for other people to just validate us where we could still think it's BS. You know, you've proven it to yourself. And I mean, that's maybe the greatest gift of the whole experience, which is really cool. So many awesome takeaways. There's so many things we could talk about for a long period of time here. I think one thing I guess I'd like to ask is just, you know, your mind was so consumed before of just kind of like getting through the day, it seemed like, and you know, so hell-bent on thinking about the past and all that stuff. But you know, when you think about the future now, what do you feel like is ahead of you? What are you looking forward to? You know, what do you think is possible now?
Well, being able to take on pretty much anything, so any crisis, big or small, I literally can just take it on with a different focus and feeling calm. And just like all these exercises, they're pretty much just like, even if I have a little bit of a nick, I just go, okay, which exercise, and then just do it, and then back to focus or anything. Even doing meditation, I was very skeptical for a very long time about meditation, and now it's part of my daily routine twice. But just being able to take on the world and actually be useful and help other people.
Right. Yeah, imagine that. That's awesome. Well, that's not even speaking to the emotions that are ahead of you, but you're obviously like so much lighter. I can sense with you. There's so much more of a playfulness about you now than a few months ago. So much more joy. And then there's also like a real confidence, not like the stern, aggressive version that I was seeing a couple months ago, right? Where there was this facade, but it's like you really believe it, and you really own it, and it's beautiful. There's a strength about you that's like also distinctly feminine, if you know what I mean, where you're not like trying to project this artificial strength. It's like it's just the strength of you really owning who you really are and not having to force it, which I think is really awesome.
And even but with the emotions and everything, I can't imagine myself ever having a depressive episode again or an anxiety episode again. It's been 2 months, at least 2 months since it's in the past. It's gone, and it's good to know that can be forgotten. Like, or just the thought of, oh no, I'm going into depression. Actually, I'm just a little bit sad, and then try and snap myself out of it. But exercises to get me out of it.
Exactly. Well, you've really understood the power of taking control of the mind's ability to form meaning around things, right? Because it really is the case that when we let our mind spiral and believe, oh gosh, now I'm depressed, well, then that's where our mind is going to take us, right? And so, you know, you've really gained a proficiency and a mastery over these things. You have, just like how you've taken control of your physical health, you know, you've really committed to putting in the work and mastering it, and it's become a part of who you are. And so that's really what I love to see from my students and my clients, because it's not about just like hearing one little concept, it's about integrating it into how you live, and then it becomes a part of who you are, and then you don't really have to think about it much anymore. So that's fantastic. Just in kind of closing here, you know, maybe think about where you were at a couple months ago, because there are people listening right now who would be in a similar place where their mind would be taking them to very dark corners. They'd be feeling maybe a little hopeless, not really sure. They maybe have felt like they've tried everything, that it's just not really possible for them. What would be kind of your kind of closing thoughts for someone in that space?
Keep an open mind and do further investigation outside of the norm. And the mind is way powerful than you actually believe. It's so much bigger than you thought. It's definitely worth giving a try. It's a living proof. So person who I used to be is, well, reduced to dust. Took a chance. If I had nothing to lose at that point, and absolutely worth it. Yeah. Well, and see, that's exactly the point right there, isn't it? Right? Because I think a lot of people
get to this place where they don't want to put that extra foot forward, either because they're worried they're going to fail, or they're worried that they're not worth it. And both of those are not necessary. The second one certainly is not true. The first one does not have to be true, so long as they're willing to be a little strategic. So I am so proud of you, Joan. There's no words. Proud seems like such a small word, really, to describe how I feel about you. But I'm so happy for you. You've really done everything. You followed the process. You committed. You did it for yourself. You earned every piece of joy that you've been experiencing. I'm so excited for the future for you. It's going to be fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. I genuinely wouldn't have been able to do it without you. Just, I thought in my gut, I knew there was someone who could help, who understands as well. That makes a huge difference. So,
for sure. Well, like I said at the beginning, I was just the guy with the GPS, but you were the one driving. So you got yourself to the destination the whole time. But I'll be excited for our paths to cross again. And again, thank you so much for turning your story into a blessing for other people. It means a lot.
Thank you so much.
All right, Joan, take care for now.
You too. Okay. Bye for now.